This morning I have with me Dr. Temkin, who's a nonprofit manager and consultant who travels all over the world discussing problems such as what we will be talking about today and others. We also have Michelle Moore McNeil, who's in public health and also HR manager. And last but not least, we have Dr. Moore, who's a mental health psychologist. So we have a wealth of knowledge here on the stage with us this morning, and each one will tell you a little bit more about their expertise as they go into, and I will be asking questions. But first we will have Dr. Temkins go over a little bit about the survey that you've just received, and then we will get into the panel discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, this is a well-trained audience. Thank you very much. Okay. I hope everybody had a chance to go through and score your results. If you haven't, and I think we ran out of surveys, I'm very sorry, but this doesn't necessarily have validity to it. However, I think when I ask the questions, you're going to see they're actually, it may not be scientifically proven, but we have some validity here anyway. It's a fun way to introduce the topic we're going to be talking about today. I'm just curious. So, how many people had over 60, put your hands up if you had over 60 points. Put one hand up. Nobody. Okay. How about 51 to 60? All right. Can you put your other hand up if you feel it, put both hands up if you feel it kind of described you? Okay. Great. How many had 41 to 50? That's me. Whoa, we're a lot. And how many feel it describes them? Okay. So I guess we're seeing some validity here. All right. You can't go through a doctoral program without talking about things like validity and studies and all that sort of thing. But that was many, many, many years ago, so I kind of fudged that a little bit. All right. 31 to 40 points. And the other hand up too, if you feel it describes you. Okay, pretty much so. 21 to 30. Nobody? And under 21 points. All right, so we really have the bulk in the 31 to, I've got to look at what the next one was, to 50 points. And that's usually what you see. A lot of times these things are pretty bell curve. I think the point is that just because someone is different from you, it's a difference. It doesn't mean that they're difficult. It means that they are different. And I think you've all been around long enough to know that, excuse me, if you have somebody, for instance, who is a big picture person, that's me, you cannot operate without the detail person. That detail person can drive you crazy, right? Because they want to get to the bottom of everything. They want to know the numbers. They want to know that it works out. And the big picture person's going like, just let's get there already. But I've got to tell you a very quick story. I planned a conference for an entire year with another big picture person. We were a month out, and we had nothing together. I had to ask a friend of mine who's a conference planner to come in, and in a month, she got the speakers, she got the rooms, she got the program put together, she got somebody to run, the person who lets you in and gives you, the registration stuff. You need every kind of person. So differences are not bad. What we're going to be talking about today is becoming aware of the difference between differences and those who are really difficult and toxic. And it's really how do we handle those toxic people that we really have to watch out for. So I'm going to turn it back over to Joanne and let her run this.
Thank you, Dr. Timpkins.
Terry is good.
Terry, okay, thank you, Terry. I've known Terry for many, many years. She also does coaching in the nonprofit community. So when you're having difficult times in the workforce, she's someone who can come in. You know how sometimes you have that one board member who may not really be on point with everything that you're doing? She's someone who will come in and do coaching and talk with your board and speak with you. So she's been really good. We've known each other for many years. But I want to move to Michelle McNeil and find out what is the difference between difficult people in a toxic environment. And then we're going to let Dr. Moore answer after you, Michelle, on that one.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Morning. So happy to be here with you all. In taking a look at somebody who we would describe as being difficult versus somebody who we may describe as being toxic, I want to focus on the latter. An individual we would consider toxic based on when they present themselves, they present not just the challenges, or they highlight the challenges or the problems, they do it in such a way that it permeates the environment that they're in. So they could be a part of contributing to, and quite often, and Dr. Muir will talk about it, are not alone in doing that. They would contribute to the environment becoming toxic. So what that would look like is a team member that may then, in complaining and grumbling about what the organization is or isn't doing, or what isn't working, and why the manager is, stupid, don't know what they're doing, don't know this. There is no solutions. They will point out everything that's wrong. They will be critical of that environment and of the team, but not looking towards solutions or to say, well, maybe what is it that I'm doing? Or if there's an issue with something or someone going on, they're not trying to address that, they're just trying to talk about it. As opposed to somebody who may present as being difficult, that presentation may be based on a number of factors that may be going on for them personally versus not, or that's just their personality type. They're very comfortable with the way that they would express themselves, and sometimes it is how we receive them as being difficult based on our own personality types that we then use to typecast someone. But Joan is going to explore that some more.
Thank you, Michelle. Joan, Dr. Joan.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I knew this was going to be a crowded room because we all have to deal with difficult people. And at some point in our lives, we find ourselves in a toxic environment. I don't need to tell you, I know you watch the news, that there's a toxic environment at 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue. Yeah. And I wanted to challenge you because I think most of the people in this room are in leadership roles. And when you're in a leadership role, you have an extra responsibility about your own behavior, right? That you're not a difficult boss, but also you're responsible for creating the environment. So you creating or sustaining the environment, right? You can't fix everything, but you are ultimately responsible. So it's really great for us to be self-aware as leaders about our own challenges and our own communication style. We should be assessing our work environment. Is it healthy? Is communication good? Are people gossiping? I started my career as a family therapy researcher at the University of Miami, and so I really think in systems, right? Because systems are way more powerful than people. But all of us create systems, right? And so one of the words, I know you know what this is triangulation. So triangulation, gossip is a form of triangulation, but triangulation is, let me use my friend Michelle. I have a conflict with Michelle. But instead of working it out with her, I go to Terry. That's triangulation. So when it should be a 1-2 communication, it's a 1-2-3 communication. And guess what? Terry can't fix the problem with Michelle, so I have accomplished nothing. So one of the things I want to caution us to think about as leaders, when you hear problems, make sure you get to all the sources together. Make sure you put them in the room. Because when you lend an ear to one side, it creates great conflict. The other thing I want to say quickly, I wouldn't be respectful as a clinical psychologist if I didn't say this, is that for all of us, we bring ourselves into every environment that we're in. We bring ourselves. And when we're not well, we may not be aware of how we're contributing to the toxicity. Do you see what I mean? And the number one thing I want to point out, I really enjoy my work. I do couples and family therapy. One of the biggest reasons why people show up at work as difficult is that they're having problems at home.
Yes.
That's the number one reason. It's hard to hide it. If you're having fights with your husband, if you're on the verge of divorce, if you are struggling with a child who got arrested, it's hard for you to show up at work as positive. But you don't want people to know that, right? So they just see your edge. We get edgy when we're struggling with things. And that's a normal thing. So I just want to ask you to recognize that and look for help. Don't think that there's a superwoman syndrome talk today. Let's not be superwoman about our emotional stuff. It's okay to ask for help. And be sensitive to other people. My own sensitivity has risen greatly about other people. For example, veterans, post-traumatic stress disorder, people who just explode. Think about that. There is a reason. And you know that statement, hurt people hurt people?
Yes.
Remember that. And so there are places that you can get help for that. But the first thing we have to do is be aware. And if you're a leader, really start assessing your team, your group, and see what you can do to change a toxic environment.
Thank you, Dr. Murray. We're going to come back to that about hurt people, hurt other people. But at this time, Dr. Timken will go over that same question.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Thanks. I just want to respond because I loved the answers of both Michelle and Joan. And I think it's really important to remember that most difficult people are not intending to be difficult. You know, there are some, and we know them, right? But in most cases, you know, as Joan just said, it's a combination of different things that oftentimes result in that edge that makes it difficult for the rest of us. I think also, and Michelle alluded to this, and I think it's important to just come back and really stress it, is that a lot of times people are relying on communication styles. Communication is what my background is educationally, so both interpersonal and organizational. And what I've seen over the years is that they're relying on communication styles that worked for them well throughout the years. If they faced a certain situation and they reacted in a certain way and they got a good response, then they are likely to go back and use that again and again. And that's going to be especially in situations where they're frustrated, where they are feeling wronged. Maybe they feel they're the only ones doing the work and everybody else is just kind of sloughing it off. And so they're going to rely on that style that worked for them. The other thing, and just the last thing I want to say, is most people are truly trying in their own way to do the job the best way they can. And it may not come across that way, but they are trying. So sometimes when you have people who, for instance, are constantly asking questions, and everybody starts rolling their eyes the minute that person opens their mouth, okay? You know, for them, they want to know that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And I have found that in the long run, if we had listened to the people that had questions, we would have saved ourselves a lot of trouble. They are trying to make things best for the organization, your team, whatever. So I think if we keep that in mind as well, it's valuable.
Well, Terry, while you're on that topic, there are many types of archetypes, and you're kind of the same as personalities. Can you tell us a few of your favorite? And then I'll move to Joan and Michelle to talk about why it's so difficult to deal with some of those archetypes.
Okay. Yes, there are a lot of them, but I probably maybe have 6, 7 of them that I think are the ones that really are problematic. The first one is the steamroller. You know, that's the person who, that person actually often knows a lot and is pretty responsible and has a desire to show that they are in fact a leader. The problem is the way they do it is just to kind of roll over everybody else. And, you know, it's hurtful to the people who are getting flattened that, you know, because they're made to feel that their opinions aren't valuable. And their ideas are being squashed and everything else. Those people will rarely admit that they are doing anything wrong. You know, they're oftentimes very similar to the bully. The bully, though, doesn't have the real leadership. The bully really is coming out of fear that they're probably inadequate. And so, you know, you see that. Okay, so the steamroller. The second thing is the time bomb. And you've all seen that, where you've been in a room with somebody who you've known for a long time and you think they're great, and then all of a sudden they explode. And you've heard about it. And other people have said they've been the victim of those explosions, but you didn't see it. And then all of a sudden one day, you're the victim, right? So that's one. The motor mouth, the one who just won't stop talking. And they usually don't say very much. But okay. The gossip, and I know that some of you came to this session because it said we were going to talk about the gossip. You know, that's kind of self-explanatory. It's so ubiquitous that we often forget that this person can erode a lot of trust in a team. Because all of a sudden, you know, well, are they saying that about me? Or, you know, if that's true about that person, can I trust that person? A couple others, the indecisive, the one who just can't make a decision no matter how much information you give them. The whiner, that was another one that was kind of advertised in this session, and I think it's true. It's, you know, the person who constantly, oftentimes this person will use things like always or never, and most of us have learned by now, you know, there is really no always or never, and who always thinks that, do you know the story about the 2 twin boys who, well, they could be girls. One was the eternal optimist and one was the eternal pessimist. And the parents tried doing everything with these kids. They took them to a psychologist who said, I know what to do. I'm going to take the pessimist and put them in a room with every toy imaginable, and puppies and kittens, and it's just going to be wonderful. And I'm going to take the eternal optimist, and I'm going to put them in a room filled with manure. They come back an hour later, and the pessimist is still really pessimistic. And they say, why? You've got all these toys, you've got these puppies and kittens. He says, because it's all going to be taken away. To the room, that's, by the way, the whiner, okay? But just to finish the story, they go into the room with the optimist, and this kid is running through all of this manure. They're just like, with the biggest grin. And they say, why? With all this in here, there's got to be a pony somewhere.
Thank you, Terry. I'm sure we can all see the humor in that. Great story. Dr. Moore, can you tell us, she gave us like 3 of those archetypes, and I'd like for you to address the first 3. How do you deal with the steamer, the bully, and the time bomber? And then we're going to let Michelle deal with the other 3.
So whenever you work with someone or you're in relationship with someone, it's always good to figure out what it is they need. They need something. We all need something. And so the steamroller really needs to be acknowledged as a leader and to own something. You know what I mean? So that's the person you say to, thanks, that's such a great idea. What do other people think? You might really think it's going to bomb. But it's important to acknowledge them and then allow them to say something so at least you control the responses so they are not taking over the room. I agree with the statement about bully. Excuse me. And for other reasons I won't say about 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue. Remember I said to you I'm a family therapist. I do couples and families. It's become very difficult for people to talk about bullying, right? When so much of it is public. Grown-ups are publicly berating other people, making them feel small, insulting them, even using inappropriate language on Twitter, in press conferences. This is really challenging. But the bully is coming from a place of insecurity, as Terry said. And if we could recognize this, because all of us have been bullied at some point in our lives, hopefully not in childhood. It's harder to deal with it when you're not fully formed. And remembering bullying is not physical only. When you're being berated and called names, that person is essentially asking you to feel the same way they do. Do you get that? So the bully is insecure, unsure of themselves, thinks all kinds of horrible things about themselves, whether they're aware of it or not, consciously or subconsciously. They're putting that on you. Let it go. Let it go. And one of the things that's been hard for me to do is, because I love to explain things, is there's some things you just can't explain. So you just got to do it. Thank you for your contribution. You know what I mean? After the barrage of hate, thank you for your contribution. And just move on. Move on with your day. I take moments to meditate, right? Because I've got to release that negativity. And that's one of the things that you need to do. Because if you carry it, you might not realize it. 2 hours later, you're berating someone else. That's why the home stuff matters. Because when you're having deep conflict at home, you show up at work conflicted. And you're attacking people, your voice starts to elevate and you don't even realize it. So you're a tone higher than you need to be, you're pressing hard and you don't need to be that way. So just be aware of ourselves. While we point to other people, recognize that we have blind spots. We have spaces in our lives where we do not see ourselves. We don't see the ugliness that's there. And the only way we can see it is to be in trusting relationships and then listen to that trusted person. A blind spot is what it is. You will never see it. You see, that's on I-95, you're coming up and you don't see the car. Everybody else sees the car coming up to your left. You don't see it. The fact that you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. A blind spot just means you don't see it. It doesn't mean that car is not there. That's why, especially leaders, you have to be open, because people see our blind spots and we don't see it. So when a trusted person says to you, you know what, you're too harsh sometimes, pay attention, go home, examine it, reflect on it. You don't have to agree right away, but reflect on it. Remember, a blind spot is what it is because you don't see it. I know I forgot the third one.
Your third one was a time bomber.
The time bomber. That is generally in my domain, mental health. People who are that out of control have something seriously going on. Normal, we can have situational things, but when it's become our character, our style, it needs examination. Maybe that person has come from a childhood where there was domestic violence in the home, there was a lot of verbal abuse, and they've just kept it all pent up, and then one day it just explodes. And often, this isn't a tragedy. That's why I'm so honored to do this work. I really am. Because how are we going to get out of this mental hell that we're in? You know why? Because the people who've had the most abusive, most traumatic backgrounds also end up having traumatic and abusive lives. Do you see that? And that's why healing is needed. Because otherwise, you also perpetuate that, right? And so the time bomb, that's somebody who has a lot of pent-up hurt, a lot of pent-up anger, a lot of pent-up frustration. They could also have a mental health disorder, like bipolar, and they just explode. If it's something that's repetitive, it needs examination. And if you know that person and you love that person, help them to go and get help.
Thank you, Joan. Now we're going to have Michelle.
Let me just add one
Okay.
thing, though,
All
and
right,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. That's okay.
But, unfortunately, getting the help they need is not going to turn things around immediately. And I think that we oftentimes need a way to deal with it immediately. And I just want to add that I think sometimes we just need to say, you know what, I can't talk about this right now. We'll talk about it later, and walk out. Because, you've got to protect yourself in the moment, and the other's going to take a while to do. So, anyway.
Thank you, Terry. Great point. We're now going to have Michelle talk about the motor mouth, the gossiper, and the indecisive person, and then we'll have Terry come and wrap it all up for us. Thank you.
So, one of the things that I think it's important for us, when we sit in the role as managers, and you're working with a team, two or a large group, and I think Dr. Muir talked about this, and also Terry, is that, one, we want to recognize that we're going to have a lot of personalities in the room. So if we can acknowledge that, then we are not surprised when whoever shows up in the room. And as Dr. Muir mentioned, that saying, when and where I enter, wherever I enter in the workplace, I'm bringing all of my stuff with me into the workplace. And so for 20 years, when I ran the EAP here in Broward, for Broward schools, I would get the call from administrators saying, this is what's happening with a particular person, or this is the incident that happened between coworkers, and I'm referring one person. And we always said, to Joan's point, where this is a system, well, what happened with everyone else? You cannot just be sending to the EAP to get support or to get help or to be fixed the one who spoke the loudest, right? The motor mouth, the one that was explosive, or the one that everybody else complained about was the gossiper. So in recognizing, first of all, that we will have all of these personalities, will best, I think, prepare us as managers to be able to, one, and Terry said it, first of all, guard ourselves, so that when that gossiper comes to you to say, well, this one didn't do this, and I did that, but that one didn't do it, or the person who's indecisive around, how do we make a decision, how do we move forward when given a task where they seem to be flip-flopping, you recognize that already, so you're not emotionally then charged and drawn into their stuff. Because quite often that becomes, and it could be for us, triggers. So we want to understand, what are some of our own triggers that this person is presenting when they come, because they may be gossiping about that person that kind of rubbed you the wrong way, and you want to be careful that you're not falling prey to that. So one, I think, as we talked about, and you'd mentioned, the motor mouth that's, always has something to say, and or the gossiper, I think the question then becomes, is there an issue that we need to solve? Because if you do that, can I just vent? I just need somebody to vent. Venting is, and Joe, I think, talked about it when we talked about triangulation. Venting to someone who does not have the ability to solve or resolve the issue is just gossiping. So the moment it becomes, can I just vent? If this isn't about what is the solution, we're going to be moving towards a solution, then it's just gossiping. And so we have to, for our own selves, recognize, when do we need to go, oh, hold on. Are the right people in the room to be able to address the issue that you're going to present, so we could move towards solutions? Otherwise, you're just gossiping and calling it venting. And we want to be able to move towards some solutions.
Yes, now Terry's going to wrap up those 6 architects. I think they've, explained it very well, but just if you have anything to add to those
Right.
6.
And, it's an advantage when they're my 6, And then they have to be put on the spot to say, what did Terry mean by those 6? And I think they did a great job. The only thing that I would say with the motor mouth is, again, some very simple tips that you can apply quickly is to really just interrupt the person. You give a brief summary. Don't ask them for the brief summary, all right? Thank them and turn to someone else. Because you need to be able to move away from, the person. You can thank them for their interesting ideas. Move away, all right? You can ask the person to hold their comments until others have had the chance to speak. And to agree that people will be recognized before speaking so that that person isn't just constantly interrupting and jumping in ahead of everybody else. So that's probably what I would say. Everybody did a great job, and I'm going to turn this back to you.
Thank you, Terry. And I know we have a few standing in the back. There's about 4 seats up here in the front, so if you just walk down the side, if you don't mind coming to the front, there's 2 on this side and 2 on this side. Thank you. The other question I'd like to go back to Dr. Moore again is how do, as managers, how do you take care of yourself when trying to deal with and working in a toxic environment, or if you're working with a family member who has a toxic home environment? How do you deal with that? Then, Michelle, we're going to come to you with that same question, but I want Dr. Moore to be able, to give us some little insight about that. Thank you.
Sure. As I said to you before, as a manager or any kind of leadership role, remember, you're there to do the job, but your most important role is to guide other people. So then you have to know where your team is at. Who's wounded on your team, right? Who's doing great, who's wounded, and who's perpetually a problem. Michelle is very good at talking about the perpetual problem and disciplinary action. She'll talk about that. So when you recognize that there's something going on, recognize that all of this becomes a burden for you. It interrupts you as a leader from doing what you need to get done. It also kills your energy and your mood. And so self-care is pretty important. So I'm going to say the things that are not popular, right? There was a talk yesterday. Be mindful. What does mindful mean? Really do one thing one time. And if you notice yourself, as I had when I was younger and I did not do this, you will be carrying this negative energy with you all day. When if you had just taken the time to process it, what it meant, if you were attacked as a leader publicly, if someone accused you wrongfully of something, if one of your staff misbehaved, which then, reflects on you, you've got to take the time. There's this belief that if we keep going, we're going to solve things. We actually don't. We actually lose our energy and we lose our focus with the negativity. So take 5-10 minutes, close your door, and just really process. Remember what I said? You don't have to respond. That was the hardest thing for me to learn, to just say, thank you for sharing. Thank you for your contribution, right? And then go process that and release whatever the negativity that now brings for me. I need to release that. But if I don't take the time, there are some work days where there's absolutely no time. Well, when you get in your car, turn off the radio, don't call anybody, just process. So you don't take it home, right, as well, and attack people there unintentionally. We don't intend to, but you have to release that negativity, or you will be carrying it. That person was unable to manage their negativity and dumped it on you or on the team. That's the reality of it. And you want to release it so you don't carry it and transfer it to someone else. And just working on one thing at a time and recognizing that working on our relationships matters just as much as doing the task. Because if the relationships break down, you're not going to get your stuff done, or the team won't get it done, or they'll get it done late. So you really need to focus on taking care of yourself in that manner during the workday. And remember, there's an extra burden on you as a leader, so other people are going to want to be comforted. They're going to hear the hostility. They're going to maybe want to talk to you about it. So if you haven't released it, how do you help the other members of the team? And be fair. Find out the information first before you act. That's why you can never talk to one person. It's not enough information.
Joan, before we move to Michelle, you've talked a lot about Pennsylvania Avenue. How do you think the toxic environment is affecting the society as a whole?
Absolutely.
Before we move into the...
This is really painful. So my whole passion is just our community, right? African American families. That's my passion. And I can tell you that this is impacting the entire nation. There's a sense of dignity that has been just lost. Right? And we were so proud to have the first African American president who, when he was attacked, he did, you talk about toxic environments, there were times when he went to Congress and it was a toxic environment. And one of the things he taught us was that self-control. Sir, there was just a little twitch maybe on his lip, but he would turn around to that senator, and just say, sir, it so happens that. Do you see what I mean? And I'm sure when he got home, he had to release it, right? And I'm sure Michelle was a great therapist. But that was a great example. We don't have that. We also have insinuation. We also have facts that have been challenged and where non-facts are treated as if they're facts. It's very harmful to our country. So how do you create an environment in your home, in your team, when that's going on? For us, it's racially charged. There are ugly things that have been said that make it then people around us, our neighbors, people in our community then feel justified to insult us and to say things that they never said before. It is very harmful. But I also want to say, especially to our elders, let's wake up. Our elders taught us this. It was way worse. And we have to recognize that we have come a long way, even though this is a slip back. See, because our elders didn't just get insults. They were burned out of their homes. So we need to just recognize that we want to halt this because we don't want to go back there. And our elders fought for us to have the right to be in this absolutely beautiful hotel today and have this Women of Color Empowerment Conference. And you all know that 60 years ago, that was not gonna happen. We were not welcome on the beach. We were not welcome on the beach, Fort Lauderdale or Miami. And that's why I say, let's look to our elders. They taught us a lot. We cannot get discouraged, but we should be deeply concerned about 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Great point, Dr. Mira. Let's give her a hand for that. That really is some great information she just gave us. So we're going to come back to Michelle. From a public health stance, how do you think toxic and working with difficult people is affecting the environment as well?
I mean, I think Joan spoke to that in terms of how it impacts the environment. It impacts us. We have to, I come from both a public health as well as an HR kind of integration, and the two met for me in a way where I needed to, as I did my EAP work and really focused on the individual, really recognize that it needed to be broadened. And so one of the things that I look at is how, as an integrated approach to what we do when we talk about our health, and how the health, not just even of us as an individual or our families, but the health of our work environment, right? Work culture, and what does that look like? So a toxic environment, we know it's the given. It starts with the individual, it impacts the team, the system is impacted, the work environment is impacted, and sometimes it's the larger system, the larger work culture that's toxic, and then teams are impacted, and you bring on new individuals into that toxic environment, and it just permeates completely. But there is a model I want us to talk about. There's the stop, start, change, and continue model. And it's a model that we could use individually, we could use it in our relationships, we could use it in our work environments, we could use it with our teams. And it's one that I use in all areas of my life. And just to really quickly stop, what is the thing that we just need to stop? It's wasting my time, it's not bringing me any value, it's not making me unhappy. Recognize what that is, document it. What is it that I'd want to start? What would add value and bring benefit? What new skills would I need to start to be able to contribute to my growth and development? What new experience would help that I would want to start? And then the next stage after that is, what is it that I would want to change? What would I want to tweak or update? So I'm not necessarily looking to stop that or throw that out, but I want to make some changes to that. Again, personally, work, relationships, all apply. How can I improve this process? What or who is doing something similarly and is doing it really well? And then what are those things that I recognize that is present already that's really bringing good results that I want to continue? Is it a daily habit? Mindfulness, meditation, quiet. I do a 4 by 4 by 4. I breathe in for 4. The count of 4, I hold my breath for the count of 4, and then I release and completely expel everything for the count of 4. And I work in a white male paramilitary organization. Needless to say, I do that quite often. And so it is. These are the things that what I'm sharing in the stop, start, change, continue model. It's something that I practice, and it's something that I use with the team that I have. Okay, wait a minute. Yes, it sounds like the world is about to blow up. Let's just pause. What are we talking about? What processes that we need to look at, because I like to look at big systems also, to look at what it is that we want to change and then dive into the details of that. So for me, Joan, that's when I think of toxicity and what we're looking to address. I start first with me, then I start with my team, and the hope and the prayer is that it will permeate into the larger environment. But I also use my role and position that I am in and as a corporate leader to question or to nudge my senior leadership in terms of some of the conversations that we should be having to do that.
Great point. Thanks, Michelle. Terry and Joan, this question is for the both of you. And I'll start here with you, Terry, as the person to speak next, and then we'll go to Joan. How do you really know when you're in a toxic environment? We talked a lot about, and so it may just be the norm for some. Say a person has been in their workplace for 20 plus years, or they've been in their marriage for 30 plus years. How do you get to that point when you know it has become a toxic environment?
Whoa. You know, I think, and this is something that really Joan probably deals with every day. For me, it's simply, do I hate going into work every day? You know, am I just something, it isn't sitting right in my stomach. Whatever it is that it's not clicking, it's not working smoothly. Everything I try to do just is kind of falling apart. I think that's a very different situation than what I started out with early or in the day with just different people. Because different people, we may roll our eyes, but we get over that. This other sits with you, and I think that, for me, would be the time I would know it. Absolutely.
I agree with you, Terry. When you're in a toxic environment or a toxic relationship, the first thing you're going to notice is how your energy is low. That you will enter into that space and you realize that you don't have that high energy. When things are going well, our energy level is high. We get exhausted. And we feel like we are not comfortable. We have more negative emotions in that environment than positives. When it's work, we dread going into work. When it's really bad, we start to wake up early. You know, like 3, 4 o'clock, worried about what was said yesterday and not wanting to get dressed for work when it's work. When it's home, you don't want to go home. You have to be worried when you don't want to go home. And some people are afraid of their children. So I, work with families of juvenile delinquents. Some people are afraid of their children. I'm talking about extreme cases, right? When families have gone so wrong that there are parents who've had physical fights with their children. That's what I mean. That's to the extreme. Do you see what I mean? I don't mean you're afraid of your children because you don't want to be a mother. Somebody is dying to have a question, Joanne, over there. So you
Yes,
can.
we're going to open up questions. 1 minute. Let us wrap up the panel, and then we're going to
So
go into the questions.
I agree with Terry. It's when you're in a space where it's more negative than positive. Your experience is more negative than positive. And I agree 100% with what Michelle is saying. The first thing you want to do is look at yourself, because sometimes you don't realize that you started the negative chain of interactions. You don't realize that you started it. You see the negativity, but you didn't realize it's something you said before that negativity got manifested. So you have to look at yourself. And I know not everybody, thank you also for talking about your own practice. If you really want to get serious about life and really enjoying life, learn how to meditate. It will transform your existence. The things around you will not interfere with you to the same level that you do today. But if you haven't learned it, just simply take 3 minutes, close your eyes in your car, in your office, in your bedroom, just close your eyes and do nothing but breathe.
Thank you, Joan. We're going to wrap up. Yes, we're going to let Michelle, and then we're going to wrap up with the final question. What resources and referrals as a manager, HR manager, Michelle, would you give to this? And you want to piggyback on what Joan just said as well? You can move forward.
Sure. Thanks so much. So I wanted to just mention, just to piggyback a little bit on what you're saying, part of this integrated work that I do, and I spoke about it a little bit last year when we did the panel on Mind, Body, Spirit, is that Joan has talked a lot about our emotional and our mental health, right? And we're talking about the work environment, which is our occupational health. So there are pillars that define our entire the whole of who we are, right? And so for me, those are the mental, the emotional. It speaks to the spiritual. It's our financial health. It's our relational health. What's happening for our relationships, and are those healthy? Our environmental health, where we not just live, but also where we work. Our occupational health, our financial health. So these are all of these things that come together for us as individuals in the same way it does for those individuals that are part of our team or those that we work with, and it's the same for the communities where we live. So I want us to be cognizant of that, because that's the piece for me that's really critical, that we quite often show up in some areas. We show up in our occupational health because, we're on our way to the C-suite, or we show up where our mental is good, or our relationships may be quite off. We don't have good relationships with people that we can really communicate with and be authentic with and be vulnerable and be ourselves with. So I want us to really look at all of those pieces. In terms of resources, I have to advocate for an EAP. When we're talking about an organization, I've had the pleasure of both managing an EAP, and now the EAP reports directly to me, and the values that an EAP is such an underutilized resource. Unfortunately, in any company, the EAP may see between 3 to 5% of your organization. And so it's so critical for us to take a look, for you as a manager, as a supervisor, how, one, you can can access services for yourself if necessary, but also provide a resource to your team, because the person may be saying, I'm going through a challenging divorce. I may be taking a look at, is this still the place for me? And I need to be able to do some work with someone around what is my next. I'm dealing with aging or sick or death parents who are dying, and so I need to be able to get that. Utilize your EAP as a resource. Once you've had those conversations, come up with a plan of action and say, here is some external resource that will provide support for you to deal with personal issues that I don't need to be aware of or be knowledgeable about.
Thank you, Michelle. The monitor just gave me my time, so I'm going to go ahead and open up for
The
questions.
EAP is Employees Assistance Program.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. But let's give this panel a round of applause before we go into questions. Thank you, thank you. So I know we saw a hand in the back that was kind of there for a moment. Stand and we'll get your question.
Hi. I just wanted to know, is it possible to actually be in love with something, whether it's your career or your relationships, even though that it's toxic for you to be in them?
I love that question.
Yeah, that's Joe's question. She's all over there.
That is right up my alley. The answer is absolutely yes.
When you know that it's bad, but you need to let go, but you cannot because of course, certain situations or...
Well, yes, you can let go, but at this point, the point at which you are speaking, you are not willing to let go.
Yes.
So there's something about familiarity, right? So when we find, that's why I say I love to do family work, because patterns get passed down through families, right? So when you're in a situation in your family with a lot of chaos, you often end up, unless you do like Iyanla Vanzant says, unless you do the work. Right? She says you have to do your work. Right? You have to work on yourself spiritually, emotionally to break those patterns. Those patterns don't get broken up here. They do not get broken by your saying, I don't want to be hit by a man. They don't get broken that way. You have to do more work than that.
Thank you, John, because we got about a couple of more questions we're going to take. We have one here and one up here in the front. Yes.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for all that you've offered. My question is directly around EAP. If you have a person on your team or in your organization that's toxic, and from a management perspective, you mandate that person to EAP, have you seen much success?
Well, remember, a referral to an EAP is just an offer. And at the end of the day, you can't, the individual may or may not, because that's always the choice. And so what you want to be careful of is that an EAP is not used as a punitive measure. It is a support and an additional benefit for that individual. And frankly, the work that is required if somebody were to come through an EAP and to be referred to a therapist to do some work, if they're not ready to do that work, they're not going to do that work. They're going to show up in that therapist's office, they'll sit and fold their arms, and they are shut down. And once you've offered it, and you could let that go. You've done your part as a manager.
The reason why I'm asking the question that way is because we're with a PEO, ADP Total Source. When we have access to EAP. Mm-hmm. One of the things that it was sent to me, I'm in HR where I work, and it was sent to me that I can mandate somebody that has an issue to EAP. Mm-hmm. If we mandate them, that's why I'm a little bit concerned about mandating and the person having a willingness to go through it. Mm-hmm. So are you saying that they would just be resistant, or what would be the expectation?
It depends on your organization. I've worked in a setting where you can formally refer or mandate someone, but a formal referral doesn't mean that they have to do it, because you cannot make someone go to counseling. You can document it, and quite often, unfortunately, sometimes it's used as a part of the progressive discipline, and we have to remind managers and administrators that you cannot, in fact, do that, because that cannot show up in that individual's personal record. It is truly a recommendation, and a strong recommendation, but I often and will always, is when I speak with managers, before you do that formal referral, have you addressed truly the individual? What could be the areas of concern? Are they open to voicing what their concerns are and or why? Have you talked with the team and as a team come up with some strategies? Like, what work did you do before? Because what you don't want to do is to be viewed as the manager that's sending someone to the EAP just to get them out your door, as if the EAP is going to be used as punishment, because then that invalidates the value that the EAP could offer to you, to that employee and to that organization. And ultimately, when that person is ready, they will do the work. If they're not ready, and I've had experience, people are mandated, they would come in, they come in resistant, but the interaction that we have with them in doing the psychosocial assessment have them have a slightly different view, and they're willing to go examine that. Or they may say, I'm not interested, step away, and 6 months later they come in on their own because they're ready to do the work.
Thank you, Michelle.
Do employment law, and let me just tell you that
What was that? We can't.
No, I just wanted to add that as a person that does employment law, that would be an illegal action. And you would give that person a power to have a valid claim. You can never mandate any type of medical or therapeutic treatment to any employee. And that's
Thank you.
really what she's trying to say when she said, and don't let it show up in writing in an employee's file.
Okay.
So it's just a recommendation, ultimately, but it's not, cannot make it happen.
Thank you for that answer. We have someone standing here with a question.
Sure.
And then, yes.
Who has one more?
We have one question here, and we're only going to take your one. That's the last one, because we got to be able to make sure people get to lunch on time, and you get a chance to stop by the restroom. So we can only take the last two. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you all so much again for your information. This is valued. I needed this very much. My question is, the way I've been able to process as the person who is the details is that I give people names, like you said. So I have cloud walkers, people who just are like, oh, everything's great. And then other people that I consider volunteers, because I don't know what they do on a day-to-day basis. And my question is, if I recognize that I'm on a team of cloud walkers and volunteers, I want to know what my manager is supposed to, like, how does he or she recognize this? So my question is, how do I manage my manager?
Well, I think they've given you some valuable information here already today. And one is the triangular approach that she talked to you about. Everyone needs to be in the room, the volunteers, the cloud walker, and your manager when you're addressing that.
That's the problem. He's not always in. So what do I do? Because I am the one who vents, and I didn't realize it was costing me refraining from hurting somebody.
So let me get your question. You want to fix your manager, or you're above the manager?
No, I'm not. That's what I'm saying.
Ah,
And he or she, I work with them.
that is, you're managing upwards. That is highly risky business, right? Because your power is not there. But if I were you, I'd do an exercise for yourself and ask, what is it in this team that's valuable to you? Exactly what Michelle just said. And what is not valuable to you, and evaluate if this is a place you want to stay. If you decide that you want to stay, then you want to have a conversation with your manager, but be humble about it. Get that nobody likes to be criticized. And every time you say, I think we should do this, it's a criticism. So know that you're going to have to land it well, and the best way to avoid that is always praise before, talk about all the great things that are going on in the team, and that you have a few ideas you'd like to share, and you just have to let it go because you're not in management. After that, you're going to have to let it go. Thanks.
Thank you. You all were a great audience. Sorry we ran over time. I know some of the ones in the back left, but thank you all. Enjoy your lunch. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.